The so-called black elite just lost their grip on our community, and the Democrats are scrambling because they can't deliver the plantation vote anymore. The Boule's influence is gone, and we did that. Let's talk about something that's been hiding in plain sight for decades, the Boule. For those who don't know, we're talking about the network of black fraternities, sororities, and their graduate chapters that have positioned themselves as the gatekeepers of black political thought. These are your alphas, your deltas, your AKAs, your kappas, your omegas, the college-educated black folks who decided they were our natural-born leaders simply because they could afford Greek letters and step shows. And honey, their usefulness to the Democratic Party just expired like milk left in the sun. You see, the Boule has always operated as the middleman between white political power and black communities. They were the translators, the validators, the ones who would take whatever scraps the Democratic Party offered and repackage them as victories for black America. They were the buffer class, educated enough to speak to white politicians, black enough to maintain credibility in our communities, and ambitious enough to sell out both sides when necessary. But here's what they never counted on: black America getting tired of middlemen. The psychological dynamic here is fascinating and deeply rooted in post-slavery trauma. The Boule represents the house slave mentality dressed up in corporate suits and sorority letters. They genuinely believe that their proximity to white power makes them more valuable, more important, more qualified to speak for the rest of us. They've built entire careers on being the acceptable black faces that white politicians could point to when questioned about their commitment to our community. And for decades, it worked. These organizations became the Democratic Party's black pipeline. Need a black endorsement? Call the local NAACP president, who's probably an alpha. Need someone to calm down an angry black community? Send in the AKA mayor or the Delta City councilwoman. Need to show diversity at your campaign event? The Divine Nine will fill your stage with black faces who know how to code switch perfectly for white comfort. But the 2024 election changed everything. When black voters collectively decided to walk away from automatic Democratic support, we didn't just abandon the party, we abandoned their appointed representatives too. And that's when the Boule discovered something terrifying. They had no real influence over black communities. They only had the illusion of influence, propped up by their relationships with white political power. Think about this from a business perspective. The Boule operated like a pyramid scheme, where their value was entirely dependent on their ability to deliver black votes to Democratic candidates. They were middle management in a corporation they didn't own, taking orders from executives who saw them as useful but replaceable. When black voters stopped following their recommendations, stopped showing up to their rallies, stopped accepting their endorsements as gospel, the entire structure collapsed. The Democratic Party suddenly realized they had been paying premium prices for a service that no longer delivered results. Let's be brutally honest about what the Boule represents in black America. These are the people who got their degrees, joined their organizations, and immediately started looking down on the rest of us. They speak with this air of superiority, like their college education and Greek letters somehow made them more authentically black than those of us who didn't have access to higher education or chose different paths. They love to talk about being educated and informed voters as if the rest of black America was too stupid to understand politics without their guidance. They position themselves as the sophisticated ones who understand how the system works, while treating regular black folks like children who need their wisdom to navigate complex political decisions. But here's what they never understood. Real black people have always been politically sophisticated. We didn't need their translation services. We didn't need their validation. We were perfectly capable of analyzing politicians and policies without their academic interpretations. The Boule's entire existence depended on maintaining this fiction that they were necessary intermediaries between black communities and political power. They had to convince both sides that direct communication wasn't possible, that white politicians needed them to reach black voters, and black voters needed them to understand white politicians. That fiction just got exposed. When black America walked away from the Democratic Party, we bypassed their entire network. We didn't need their permission, their endorsements, or their explanations. We made our own collective decision based on our own analysis of the situation. And in doing so, we revealed that the Boule was never leading us. They were just following us while pretending to be out front. The psychological impact on these organizations has been devastating. Their entire identity was built on being the bridge between black and white political worlds. Without that role, what are they? Just social clubs for middle-class Black folks who like to step and throw parties. From a strategic standpoint, this moment represents a complete power realignment in Black politics. For generations, the Democratic Party could influence Black voting patterns by working through established Black institutions. The churches, the Greek organizations, the civil rights groups, they had a clear playbook: wine and dine the leaders, give them access and recognition, and trust them to deliver their communities. That playbook just became worthless. The beautiful thing about this shift is that it's forcing everyone to confront some uncomfortable truths. The Boule always claimed to represent Black interests, but their primary loyalty was to their own social and professional advancement. They were more concerned with maintaining their seats at white tables than with ensuring those tables served Black communities. Look at Black politicians who came through the Boule system. They learned early that success meant being palatable to white voters and white donors. They mastered the art of speaking Black in the hood and speaking white in the boardroom. They became experts at symbolic politics, lots of photo ops and emotional speeches, minimal substantive policy change. These are the people who would show up in our communities during election season, talking about our shared struggles and the importance of representation, then disappear for 4 years while voting for policies that hurt Black families. They used their Greek letters and their degrees as shields against criticism, as if their educational pedigree made them immune to accountability. The Black preachers in this network are even worse. They turned our churches into Democratic Party outreach centers, using the pulpit to deliver political messages wrapped in religious language. They convinced our grandmothers that voting Democrat was somehow a Christian duty, that questioning the party was tantamount to questioning God. These preachers became political operatives with 501c3 tax exemptions, collecting money from both their congregations and Democratic campaigns while delivering neither spiritual nor political liberation. They were double agents serving two masters while pretending loyalty to our communities. But Black people are waking up to these games. We're recognizing that the Boule's version of Black leadership has been a massive failure. Despite decades of their political involvement, despite their degrees and connections and insider access, Black America is still at the bottom of every positive metric and at the top of every negative one. Their strategy of working within the system, of being respectable, of playing by white rules has produced exactly what it was designed to produce: a small class of comfortable Black elites and a large population of Black people still struggling for basic dignity and economic opportunity. The 2024 walkaway exposed this failure in real time. When Black voters stopped responding to their calls, stopped attending their rallies, stopped accepting their political guidance, it became clear that the Boule's influence was always more theoretical than real. Democratic operatives are panicking because they invested decades building relationships with these organizations, assuming they could control Black voting patterns through institutional channels. They're discovering that Black political consciousness doesn't flow through fraternity networks or sorority chapters. It flows through families, neighborhoods, social media, and lived experience. This is what happens when you mistake credentials for credibility, when you confuse access for influence, when you assume that speaking for people is the same as speaking to them. The Boule members are experiencing their own identity crisis right now. Many of them genuinely believe they were helping Black America by maintaining relationships with white political power. They thought their insider status made them more effective advocates for our communities. But effectiveness is measured by results, not access. And the results speak for themselves. Decades of Boule political leadership have coincided with decades of Black economic stagnation, educational gaps, criminal justice disparities, and health inequities. Maybe it's time to try something different. The psychological transformation happening in Black America right now is profound. We're moving from a mindset of seeking approval from white institutions to a mindset of demanding accountability from all institutions. We're refusing to be grateful for representation that doesn't deliver results. We're rejecting leaders who got their positions through networking rather than community organizing. This shift terrifies both the Democratic Party and the Boule because it makes Black political behavior unpredictable. They can't just call up the local AKA chapter president and expect her to deliver votes anymore. They can't assume that a Morehouse graduate with political ambitions will automatically support their agenda. Black voters are asking harder questions. What have you done for us lately? What specific policies are you proposing? How will you measure success? What happens if you don't deliver? These are business questions, strategic questions, questions that demand concrete answers rather than emotional appeals or historical guilt trips. The Boule's traditional response to Black political dissatisfaction was always the same. We need to work within the system. We need to be patient. We need to build coalitions. We need to be strategic. Translation, trust us to handle this. Keep voting Democrat. Don't rock the boat. But Black America just rocked the entire ship. By walking away from automatic Democratic support, we've forced a complete recalculation of Black political value. We've demonstrated that our votes can't be taken for granted, that our support must be earned, that our loyalty isn't inherited by anyone, including Black elites who look like us but don't necessarily think like us. The Democratic Party is scrambling to find new ways to reach Black communities now that their traditional intermediaries have been exposed as ineffective. They're discovering that they actually have to talk to regular Black people directly, that they have to address our concerns specifically, that they have to deliver results consistently. And the Boule, they're trying to figure out how to remain relevant in a political landscape where their primary value proposition, access to white power, no longer guarantees Black support. Some of them are adapting, recognizing that they need to rebuild credibility within Black communities before they can claim to represent us to anyone else. They're learning that leadership must be earned through service, not appointed through networking. Others are doubling down on their superiority complex, blaming Black voters for being uninformed or emotional, rather than acknowledging their own failures to deliver meaningful change. The smart ones are recognizing that this moment represents an opportunity to reimagine Black political engagement entirely. Instead of being middlemen for white politicians, they could become advocates for Black communities. Instead of translating Democratic talking points into Black vernacular, they could develop independent Black political agendas. But that would require humility, accountability, and a willingness to follow rather than lead. It would require admitting that their decades of political involvement produced disappointing results. It would require accepting that regular Black folks might have better instincts about our collective interests than college-educated Black elites. That's a hard pill to swallow for people whose entire identity is built on being smarter, more sophisticated, more strategic than everyone else in their community. The truth is, the Boule's usefulness to the Democratic Party was always limited to their ability to deliver Black votes without demanding white accountability. They were valuable precisely because they didn't push too hard, didn't ask too much, didn't threaten white comfort. Now that Black voters are pushing harder, asking more, and threatening white political comfort directly, the Boule's buffer role has become obsolete. The Democratic Party doesn't need middlemen anymore. They need miracle workers. And the Boule never learned how to perform miracles. So are the Boule still useful to the Democratic Party? Only if they can reinvent themselves as authentic Black advocates rather than acceptable Black representatives. Only if they can rebuild trust within Black communities rather than relying on their relationships with white institutions. The old model is dead. The question is whether they're smart enough to build something new, or if they'll just fade into irrelevance while clutching their Greek letters and their graduate degrees. Black America has moved on. The only question is whether our so-called leaders will catch up.